Thanks for being here, everybody. My name is Josh Benzing. I'm the CEO and co-founder of 404 Creative. So we're a game dev studio that makes games in Fortnite primarily. And I'm going to be talking about level design today. Thanks for coming to my talk. I know it's early in the morning. Everybody's tired. There's also a bunch of different UEFN sessions to choose from. So it means a lot that you're here for mine. So a little bit more about myself. Like I said, I'm the CEO of 404. We make Fortnite games. And although my title is CEO, I'm still very much involved in the game development side with my team and primarily leading level design in the majority of our projects. So I started creating in Fortnite about 6 years ago when the option to do that in-game first came out. And I had zero prior game dev experience. But I learned quickly and ended up turning it into my career. So I'm a self-taught level designer. I studied level design through independent research and just by absorbing content from experts in the games dev industry. And I also, once I started making my own levels in Fortnite, I started paying a lot more attention to the games that I was playing on a regular basis and understanding things that I could pull from inspiration from those ones. And not only did I study level design, I also practiced it a lot. So over the last 6 years when I've been making games, I've been a part of probably about 100 different projects, all in Fortnite, and led the level design on most of those. Most of my first projects were solo projects, and then more were built and launched underneath my team 404 once we got that started. And then we were working for brands and clients, and then so much of the games that we've built since have been collaborations. Many of those were esports, ranging from college leagues, even to the top professional stages that are out there. It's a lot of practice. So because my experience comes from very practical means, I also want to keep my session today very practical, which means I'm not going to be covering any fancy glossary terms or like design theories. And I'm also not really going to be covering any of the tool sets for designing in depth. I'll simply be sharing my personal insights and my approach to level design. And I hope that whether you are an experienced UEFN creator or if you're interested in trying it for the first time, that you can take away something new from my talk for your next project. I'll start by walking through the level design process that's been standardized in the game dev industry. Then I'll share some unique factors for you to consider when designing in Fortnite specifically. And I'll also share some personal tips and tricks, which is my favorite part of my session. And then I'm going to wrap things up with a short case study on a project that I built specifically for this talk. So let's go over the level design process. Step number 1 is planning and research. In this first step, it's all about figuring out what you want to do with your game. You need to nail down the game mode, figure out what are the rules. Is there going to be shooting? Is this a team-based game? What is the objective? Knowing everything that you can about your game ahead of time will help you to create a better level for the game. Start gathering visual inspiration and references. These could be from real-life places, movies, or other video games. I've got tons of folders on my computer of just random design references, architecture, nature, pictures of random public spaces and parks that I've been to, tons of nerdy stuff. And I just pull these when I'm looking for inspiration on my projects. The point here is to compile as much reference material as you can to help you formulate your idea. And if you already know the art theme that you want to go with at this point, it's a good idea to go ahead and research that too, as doing so can help to inform the decisions that you make when it comes to your level. Once you have an idea, be sure to draw it on paper. This is really going to help you visualize the idea that you have in your head. Now, you can't expect to draw every tiny little detail of your 3D level on paper unless you're a genius artist, which at this case, maybe that should just be what you do. But taking the time to draw any of it is going to save you a lot of time later on down the road. It's much faster to erase a pencil mark and then redraw it than it is to adjust it in the editor. So make the small mistakes here in this phase rather than down the line. Now it's time for the real work to begin, the blockout phase. This is by far the most important step because this is where your level is actually going to start to take shape. The idea is to get into the editor and start to build the level using basic shapes with little to no detail, or gray boxes, which is why it's commonly called gray boxing. The purpose is to get the right scale and to get a feel for moving around the level. And I think most of your time in this stage should be spent just wandering around the level aimlessly rather than actually crafting it and putting it together. The point of using the simple shapes is to save time and iterate quickly, because you're not making any major design commitments yet at this stage. So it's important to keep in mind that you'll likely be doing a lot of iteration and revisions during this stage. And also keep in mind, the level that you draw on paper is inevitably going to be different from the level that you end up with here, which is a good thing because it means you're thinking critically about your level as you're taking it from paper to editor. Once the blockout feels about right, you can begin incorporating the gameplay elements. So with gameplay elements added, now it's all about testing the flow and how the level affects pacing or supports gameplay. Look for any imbalances in the game mode and identify any early exploits that you can. Now that you're actually playing the game rather than just wandering around in the level, it's likely that you're going to notice some things that you want to improve. Then go back to your blockout and adjust it based on your findings. Once you're satisfied with both the level and the gameplay, it's time for the next step, to hand it over to the artists, which in most cases in UEFN might very well still be yourself. In that case, now you just go to add some artistic details and incorporate whatever your chosen theme is. When doing this, consider the details that you're adding and how it might affect the gameplay. Environment details play a major role in influencing player behavior. It's best to not overcomplicate the space and to keep it easily readable and to support gameplay. When the art is wrapped up, then it's time for the final step, testing and feedback. Here, you open up the game to more players, whether that looks like extended playtesting or simply, my advice, just publish the game. Either way, get more players in and be intentional about collecting their feedback. Often, simply observing players can be your greatest form of feedback. Watch how they navigate the space. Pay attention to the decisions that they make. I'll bet that you find things that you didn't expect. Look out for exploits. Players are masters at finding exploits. These pictures are a great example on a project that we launched not too long ago. It's just players getting into weird spaces. Take notes and consider tweaking the level according to what you see and the feedback that you get. This final step can last as short or as long as you want it to. And I'm sure that if you wanted to, you could keep finding things to change forever, but at some point, it's up to you to define what your limit is and accept that it's probably good enough and you're ready to call your level complete, which marks the end of the level design process. Now, for creating within Fortnite, since you're going to be making a game in Fortnite, there's some things that you should know if you don't know them already. First and most importantly is build mode. This is the unique game mechanic that has defined Fortnite as a game and now as a platform. Players can toggle on this feature during gameplay and essentially build their own level or create cover on the fly, using walls, floors, ramps, and cones that all connect on a structural grid. This allows for infinite strategies and creates unique scenarios in just about every game that it's a part of. However, this does come with a very high skill gap that can be very difficult to master and has the player base in Fortnite somewhat split. Some players prefer games with build mode, others prefer games without it. It's tough to say exactly what that split looks like, but for now, it seems that the majority of players are still in favor of build mode. We'll see if that changes in about a year or so. But consider whether or not you're going to have build mode as a part of your game very early on in the decision and planning process, because having this in your game mode will likely influence a lot of what you do when it comes to the design of your level. Next thing to consider is player movement. Players can move like crazy in Fortnite. They can jump over things taller than the character, they can mantle up ledges, they can even climb pretty tall walls. These movement features here are default in Fortnite, along with some others like sprinting, sliding, and crouching. Pay special attention to how this movement fits within your level, and be sure to design around it. I do not recommend adjusting these to fit your level. I've seen many creators make this mistake in the past, where they get the scale of their game is too big, and so to accommodate that, they make all the players faster, and it's just not a good idea, because Fortnite players are very used to the default movement. They like it, it's familiar to them, and it's a good idea to only change this when you want to introduce new gameplay features, such as maybe a power-up that makes you more powerful. The best place to test this movement is in a live edit session. This right here is the original developer toolset in UEFN before we had the desktop editor application. For several years, this was the only way that we could make games in the space. In this mode, you can edit and you can explore the level while in character. It is also the primary testing grounds anytime that you're going to make a game in UEFN. Here you still have access to most of the content library and assets. You can edit and manipulate these assets using the phone tool. You can also place gameplay devices and adjust their settings here. Launching an edit session from the editor will open a Fortnite client and sync them together so that any changes that you make here in this environment will update in the editor in real time. These edit sessions can also work cross-platform, meaning that you can sync any devices that can run Fortnite, which includes mobile, once again now, and you edit from those devices and have those changes appear in the editor. As an old school Fortnite creator myself, I still very much prefer to create levels this way. I'm used to it, I'm faster with it, and I get a better sense of scale when I'm creating in this environment because I can directly reference my character. I can also test the level while I'm building it at the same time. Often, as you can see here in this short video, I'll equip a weapon, place an object, swap to the weapon, and immediately verify the sightline that I just placed. This saves me so much time because I end up doing most of my revisions on the fly rather than post-blockout. However, developers who may be more accustomed to an editor and editor workflows may struggle to pick this up and possibly even avoid building in this mode entirely, which is totally fine, but don't sleep on it. Another decision to make very early on in building is figuring out what camera perspective you're going to want your game to be in. The default camera in Fortnite is third person, and that's the one that I would recommend, as most Fortnite players are more familiar with this, and all the current weapons and items in Fortnite are tailored for third person. First person, on the other hand, is relatively new, been around for about 6 months, so it hasn't grown too much in usage, but it has a massive potential in the future. Many weapons work in this mode, but there's only a small handful that have been optimized with proper animations for reloading and sprinting. But that's going to expand a lot over time, so definitely keep that in mind. The main difference between the two of these modes when it comes to level design is really about shoulder peeking. So third person gives you full visibility above and around the side of corners while your player is completely hidden, giving really strong right-hand advantage. First person still has right-hand advantage because most people are right-handed, but it requires moving your character around from cover to be able to have visibility. So nail this down before making a decision on moving on to your game mode. Tailor your level around it rather than introducing the camera as an afterthought. Fortnite has a huge library of free, high-quality assets. Definitely use these. They're free, they look great, there's more of them being added all the time, and players are really, really familiar with things that look like this, as most of the games on the platform are built with these assets. So you can benefit from some intrinsic knowledge from the players, and they might also just like how these look better. They're already scaled according to the character and their movement, so that problem's already solved. And they're tailored for build mode, meaning the building pieces, walls, floors, and stairs automatically align with the build mode grid. So if you're making a game that has build mode, you should be using these anyway. So you can make pretty much anything in Fortnite at this point. But I'd like to briefly touch on a few popular game types and just kind of go over some key factors for you to consider when making different kinds of games. First of all, parkour games, or death runs, as they're popularly called. These are like the chill and relax games in Fortnite, and although death run doesn't really sound relaxing, the established meta for these games is to make them fairly easy. They're also naturally easier for players because they require very few inputs. It's mostly running and jumping. Because there's so few inputs, the best way to add variety to these experiences is through timing and rhythm. So you can do this by making simple changes from one section to the next, turning each into its own mini puzzle. It's a good idea to keep sections short and to place many checkpoints so that when players fail, they don't lose too much progress. Introduce new obstacles or hazards as the player progresses. It's good to clearly mark what new hazards look like with like a unique color or some sort of visual so that players can recognize it. Then, in later levels, you can start to mix in multiple hazards, and players can recall what they've already learned about the hazards in previous levels, creating a natural difficulty progression over time. I think Omega Creations did this really well with their default parkour game. Check it out. Adventure and horror games are all about immersion. They rely heavily on supporting aids such as lighting, music, and sound effects to create the atmosphere of the game. The goal of the level here in these games is to control the pacing or to evoke a certain emotion. Sneaking through a small, dark hallway might create tension in a horror game, whereas emerging from a cave can create a grand reveal in an adventure game. It's all about what the player feels as they progress through the environment. Domus Mortem by Wirt Andrew is a great example of using design to create fear. This is an epic Megarvance project, and he also did an Unreal Fest talk about this a year or two ago about this same thing. So definitely check out his game and see if you can go find that talk. Build practice refers to really any game mode that focuses on build mode as a core aspect of the gameplay and is typically within a competitive setting. So with build mode being the primary gameplay aspect, most of everything else in the game is built around that mode. So these levels prioritize open spaces, leaving room for player building, for players to make their own level, and often only intermix a few structures or props just to create unique scenarios between opponents. Buildings and structures here follow that build grid. They're all made of Fortnite assets from the content library so that they can support player builds, so that they can also be broken by players to open up new pathways. Landscape design in these games is often more of a focus, as it's one of the more effective ways to introduce height variations. Rapid Realistics by Bullseye captures this balance between level design and player building in a really good way. Combat or shooter game modes rely very heavily on level design. It can be the make or break of these games. These levels require purposeful design focused on gameplay and readability. Cover is critical because players can't create it themselves like they can in build mode. Pathing and sightlines need to be carefully crafted, and the level needs to support the objective of the game. My very biased and personal favorite example of a quality shooter mode in Fortnite is this Capture the Flag game mode that my team built in collaboration with ESL. Because I like combat games the most, and I have more experience designing them, mostly everything I talk about in the rest of my session is going to be more geared towards multiplayer combat games. So keep that in mind. This right here is an interesting test to assess your level design skills. It's called the whiteboard test. It's been commonly used as a method for testing aspiring level designers in the games industry. The task here is to design a first-person multiplayer shooter level and then see where your work falls on this ranking. So I'll touch on the differences between each of these stages, and as I do, think about where you might fall on this rank. Someone who is just starting level design for the first time might build something like this. It's a big open area, it's filled randomly with cover and follows no real design practices. There's no clear pathways or sight lines. It's pretty much just pure chaos. The designer may be focused more on the visuals first, with the level design being an afterthought. Are you a beginner? If so, your next step should be studying basic design principles. Having any understanding of design at all would likely move you up to intermediate. Here you can see intentional pathways and sightlines. It actually starts to look like a level. Basic flow has been established, and you're well on your way to making a level that supports gameplay. However, the level can tend to still feel very boxy or samey with no clear distinction between areas, leading to a room, hallway scenario. It also may feel a lot like a maze. Also, there's no variation in height yet at this point, which means everything is very flat and stagnated. If you're at this stage, don't worry. There's just a few things for you to consider to get you to the next stage. Advanced is a really great place to be. Here you have more intentional pathing decisions and much better flow. You begin introducing new angles and basic height variations, which makes areas of your level feel more unique and more realistic. The level is still very simple though, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it might still have some of that samey feeling from space to space. If you consider your skill to be advanced, that's great. Time and practice is pretty much all that you need at this stage. And if I'm being honest, I would say that most of the games that I create in Fortnite probably fall under this category because I don't always need to take it to that next step. And this is often good enough for what I'm building most of the time. But if I wanted to kick things up a notch, here's what that would look like. Here you can see that the level starts to look a lot more like an architectural floor plan as it starts to incorporate more real-life design inspirations. Pathing and sightlines are designed for optimal pacing and flow. The level has more meaningful breaks from that structural grid, and it has more purposeful height variation, making each space stand out from the other. It still feels like a video game level, but the design comes together in a way that makes it feel much more immersive. This here is what you call chef's kiss. So if this is you and you consider yourself an expert, you can leave right now. Kidding, obviously. But I may not really be able to help you because you've already made it, so congratulations. However, if you're not an expert, then hopefully I can help you. And to do that, I'd like to go over my personal favorite tips and tricks to improve your level design. Number one is player choices. Players make choices constantly in multiplayer combat games. So here's a few ways to give players more control on the choices that they make. The first one is all about timing of choices, or how frequently players are presented with opportunities to make a new choice as they pass through the level. I recommend allowing 3 to 5 seconds between pathing options, meaning as the player is moving through the level, when they make a pathing decision, there's about 3 to 5 seconds of uninterrupted movement before they're presented with a new option. Having too many sections under 3 seconds can start to feel too chaotic because it requires the player to make too many quick decisions. On the other hand, anything over 5 seconds might feel like too big of a commitment, locking players into the decision that they made, preventing them from adapting their strategy on the fly. The second point is regarding the number of options that you give players. When it comes to open spaces, it's best to have a minimum of 3 ways in and out of the space. This keeps players from being committed to certain paths and allows them to make smarter decisions. It also leads to more variation in the gameplay as it prevents combat engagements from being too linear and predictable. Number 2 is height variation. Just a second ago, I was talking about height variation being an important factor in advanced and expert level designs. So I'd like to talk specifically about the sizing of height variations that I commonly use in my projects. So using a standard Fortnite wall or a tile, as you can see in the middle there, as a reference, I find that the sweet spot for height changes is around 1/4 of a tile or 1/2 of a tile. With using stairs, this ends up being about 4 to 10 individual steps on the staircase, which aligns nicely with what you would actually see in the real world, especially in outdoor urban spaces. This makes your level feel a lot more realistic. Also, these height changes are enough that they add good variables to gameplay without sacrificing the flow of the level. Tall height changes can be disruptive to flow because it requires players to possibly have to snap their neck in order for them to look up and maintain a sight line. But that doesn't mean to avoid scenarios like that. Just consider them carefully. Subtle height changes maintains flow because it requires less vertical adjustments from the player, meaning that they can keep their reticle relatively constant as they move through the level. Speaking of height variations, stairs are the best way to introduce height variation in your level. So here's some tips on how to best use stairs. Let's talk about the angle of your stairs. By default, the stair piece in Fortnite is about 37 degrees steep. Feel free to keep it this way for simplicity. But if you're like me and you like to adjust the depth of your stairs to help them feel more realistic, go ahead. It's a good practice to keep the angle of your stairs between 10 degrees and 45 degrees. Anything less than 10 degrees is flat enough that it should probably just be a ramp. I personally wouldn't recommend adjusting your stairs to be any steeper than the default 37 degrees, but if you do, the maximum is going to be 45. Anything over 45 degrees is far too steep, and at that point, it is probably just best to simply turn it into a ledge that players can jump up or climb on. If the ledge is a little taller, it might be a good idea to introduce some other ways for players to easily get up it, such as a zip line or maybe something that you can bounce on. If your staircase is leading to a doorway like this, the stairway intersecting the door might feel very unnatural or awkward, and you also rarely see this in real life. The only time you really see this is the scary basement stairs at your grandma's house. Instead, add a landing or a section of the floor at the top or the bottom of the staircase just prior to the doorway. This helps it feel a lot more realistic and it's more comfortable for the player. You can also use landings to break up the rare double staircase. So that many stairs in a row is brutal. Likely feels too tall. Once again, keep in mind what you see in real life. Everybody knows that stairs suck, and that by adding platforms between sections can ease that pain or give you a break. Pay attention to the stairs that you see around the convention center today. I'm sure that you're going to see a lot of landings on them. Now, number 4, creating cover. This is possibly the most important thing, because cover can make or break your game as the great balancer of gameplay. Always make sure to carefully test your cover as you develop. Live Edit is a very useful place to do this. Verify that your cover doesn't block weapon fire. Pay attention to this red X that might show up. This means that your weapon fire is going to be blocked. And in this case, my cover is too tall. Size your cover accordingly to create smoother gameplay. Also, be certain to test the differences between first person and third person, because how your camera aligns with where bullet trajectory actually emerges from can be different. To be thorough, make sure to test your cover using every weapon that you plan on having available in your game. Be sure to incorporate a variety of cover styles in your level. Include a mix of cover that provides different levels of protection. Hard cover refers to anything that offers durable protection. Pretty much anything that you can completely hide behind and be fully protected. Hard cover is very strong in third person because of the shoulder peak. So don't overuse it. Soft cover, on the other hand, offers much less protection, but is likely to be used more strategically by players. These could be props that have large holes in them, or even bushes that can block visibility, but still allows weapon fire to pass through it. Soft cover can give higher skilled players the upper hand as they tend to utilize it better. Overall, having different types of cover in your level can help the space feel more realistic rather than just using wooden crates everywhere, which I know is very, very tempting. Variation in cover size and height is also beneficial for your level. Full cover is any cover that is large enough to completely conceal an upright and standing character. This is best for blocking off sightlines, or in the case of first person, requiring the player to move completely around cover in order to get a sightline. Half cover is short enough for a standing player to shoot over it, but is tall enough to conceal a crouching player. This cover can be used more tactically because players can engage offensively while also having suitable protection at the same time. Provides cover while also keeping sightlines open, which creates more opportunities for combat engagements. Number 5, borders or level boundaries. Every level needs a border, and it's important for players to know where that border is. Sometimes you might want the border of your map to be a little bit more creative than simply a wall. But whatever you do, make sure to not leave any gaps or holes that the player might mistake for a pathway. Simply placing an invisible barrier is not good enough. Players should know where the map ends just by looking at it. Players should never ever run into an invisible barrier because that can be confusion, and confusion is bad. To prevent this confusion, make sure to clearly block off restricted areas, making it clear that this is not a pathway. Walls are the clearest and most understandable way to define the level border. But in Fortnite, simply making the wall one tile high may not be good enough because of the movement. Players might still believe that they can mantle over the wall, and they may have the confidence enough to try it, once again leading to confusion. You can prevent this by either making the wall taller or adding objects at the top of the wall like a railing or barbed wire that can serve as an extra visual aid, telling the player, you can't go there. Similarly, if you want to add doors as just an art style to your game, but are not actual doorways into pathways, it's important to make sure that the players know that. An easy way to make a door appear as not an option is to place an object directly in front of the door to block any possible pathing through it. Last but not least, leading players. To maintain good flow, you always want your players to know where they're going. In this scenario here, I want to lead the player to the left. There's several ways I could go about doing this. Lighting could be a good method for guiding players somewhere, but your game may need to have darker lighting in order for this to be effective. Also be careful how you use lighting. Don't be careless with it. Otherwise, you might pull players in a direction that you don't want them to go. Environment art can also communicate a lot to players. Objects that align a hallway or around a corner, like pipes or wires, can be used as a reference for pathing while also contributing to the theme of your game. Other visual aids, such as stripes or paint on the floor, can also be helpful suggestions for the players, but might go overlooked if they're too subtle. The clearest way to guide players in a specific direction is to make the other option not an option. Either remove that pathway entirely or just block it off with obstacles. However you choose to lead the player, make sure that you're making it easily visible so that players can identify and choose their path prior to arriving to the space. Now, that's all that I have for tips. And for the remainder, I want to cover a short case study on a little project that I put together just for this. So, I wanted to make a 2v2 gunfight game. This is going to be a first-person game mode, and I'm not going to have build mode as a part of this. So, the things that I need to focus on here is a symmetrical design so that it's balanced for both teams. It's compact and a small level that's designed for fast gameplay and fast rounds. For the theme, for some reason I decided I want to do a desert temple. I don't know, it just sounded like a good idea. I was inspired by brutalist architecture styles and did a little bit of research into them to find some things that I liked. For the exterior area outside of the structures of the game, it's in a desert, so naturally I'm going to go with a sand landscape. And to border off the game, because players need to know where the border is, I'm going to do nice tall mountain cliffs and kind of do this reference here where the structure of the level is kind of inset inside the mountain. So I've got my idea. Now I put it down on paper. So here I did a top-down sketch to show the pathing of the layout. I split this into an upper and a lower section so that you could see both areas of the architecture space that are above each other, because I can't really draw them on top of each other, it would be confusing. So here you can see the individual pathing for the upper sections and the lower. I also have numbers on here that indicates the height level in those spaces so that I can understand that from a top-down perspective. So 0 is just like the normal default area. -1 is for low ground. 1 is for high ground. My second sketch here, which looks oddly like a face, this is from the player POV. So this is what players are going to see from one of the spawns, and this is just for me to get an idea of what the main sightline that I want for my game is. Then I went into the blockout phase. Once again, I did this in live edit. That's where I like to do it at. And I started out very simply with large shapes, squares, rectangles, triangles. I also intermixed a few basic Fortnite assets into this, like stairs and doorways, open doorways, because I knew I was going to be using those anyway. I started out with placing just the basic shapes of my initial sightline, kind of that big trench through the middle. Then once I felt like the sizing, the area of that was good enough, I went into the architecture phase to start building out that upper and lower section, getting a good idea of how that felt on one area before duplicating it and mirroring it on the other side. Then, once I felt like the player area was good enough, I was good to go ahead and create the rest of the structures. Here you can see the end result of my upper and lower sections together. I did make some changes from my sketch to here. And a lot of those changes came from early gameplay testing. Here I threw in a couple of devices just to get a basic game mode going. I did a first-person camera, an item spawner for a weapon, and some player spawners. I had some teammates jump in and play it with me, and they had some feedback. So I had some iterations to do based on some quick notes. One note was, it seemed like players were getting stuck in the upper area too much, and you wanted a quicker way to get down to the bottom if you knew that there was a player beneath you. So I added a one-way chute in the corners from that connects the upper and the lower sections together. The other thing was the trench in the middle just started to feel like a big no man's land that you did not want to be in whatsoever. So to help that, I decided to add a bridge across to connecting the upper areas so that it would feel a little bit safer when going underneath there from above, and it just felt like there was more cover in general. Additionally, this actually added a nice new path connecting both of the upper sections. I'm a big fan of it. Now, I like how the level was, so I was able to begin visuals. Not much for now, just some simple material swaps on the shapes just to get an idea of the direction that I'm going. And I hope that I can finish the project and publish it after Unreal Fest. It'll look a lot nicer too. So, and to wrap up, I've just got some extra screenshots of it to show you all something that I did very quickly, but I'm still very proud of. So this is the main sight line from both of the spawn areas across the level. Here's the pathing from the upper area down to the lower area. In the upper area, I have a big column that's blocking off all of the doorways. It also serves as a nice cover to sort of dance around. And just a few more additional screenshots just to kind of wrap things up quickly here. And with that, that's everything that I have for my talk on level design. I hope you guys did learn something. If you have questions for me, I'd love to answer them. So feel free to come up with a microphone and ask them. We got about 10 minutes left. So thank you.